When a humble mechanic notices a disabled boy struggling outside his shop, he drops everything to repair the child's broken wheelchair, for free. He thinks it's just another good deed. But days later, a private jet lands near the garage, and the boy returns with a revelation that stuns everyone. Who is this child, really? And why does his family now want to change the mechanic's life forever? What if one small act of kindness could unlock a future you never imagined? A worn-out mechanic knelt on the oil-streaked floor of his garage, sleeves rolled up, fingers stained with grease, carefully adjusting the wheel of a broken wheelchair. In front of him sat a young boy, no older than 9, his legs motionless but his eyes filled with quiet hope. The mechanic's touch was gentle, his focus unwavering, as if the world outside didn't exist. In a world where most walk past, one man had stopped, and that single choice was about to change everything. He didn't know the boy's name, nor the story behind his tired mother standing in the doorway, hands trembling as she watched. He simply saw a child in need and did what he knew best. Helped. He thought it was just kindness, just a good deed for someone who needed it. But days later, a private jet would land on the edge of this forgotten town, and what followed would leave everyone speechless. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from. And if you believe small acts can spark miracles, stay with us till the end, because what came next, no one saw it coming. Darnell Hayes had grease beneath his nails, a faded name tag stitched onto his worn blue jumpsuit, and a silence about him that came from years of loss. Once a promising robotics engineer, Darnell now worked in a modest auto shop, tucked in the heart of a small, blue-collar American town. The kind of place where the walls smelled of oil and rubber, where the American flag hung proudly above tool racks, and where stories lived in the calluses of working hands. After losing his only daughter to illness 5 years earlier, Darnell had chosen a quieter life, fixing machines instead of building breakthroughs, keeping his head down, and helping where he could. He didn't speak much, but his kindness spoke for him. One bright afternoon, as the sun carved golden stripes through the open garage door, he caught sight of a young boy struggling to navigate the cracked pavement outside. The boy, no more than 9, had messy brown hair and a spark of curiosity in his eyes. His wheelchair tilted awkwardly, one wheel catching on the uneven surface. He was fighting it, calmly, but clearly used to the struggle. Darnell noticed the intricate keychain dangling from the boy's backpack, a miniature airplane. That small detail told him everything. The boy wasn't just a fighter, he was a dreamer. Liam, the boy's name as Darnell would soon learn, had a rare condition that limited his mobility but not his spirit. He loved machines, airplanes, anything that flew. He believed one day he would too. A few steps behind him stood his mother, Sarah, her face pulled into a tired smile that couldn't fully mask the weight she carried. Dressed in a hoodie and jeans, she looked like any working mom, but her eyes held shadows, grief that hadn't quite faded. She had lost her husband a year ago, and since then, life had become a daily test of endurance. When Darnell stepped out to help, kneeling beside Liam without saying much, Sarah instinctively hesitated. She didn't know him. The world had taught her to be cautious. But something about the way Darnell spoke to her son, not with pity, but with quiet respect, made her pause. She stayed at a distance, watching, as a quiet bond began to form between a man who'd stopped dreaming and a boy who hadn't started walking but never stopped believing. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, just as the heat began to settle on the shop's tin roof and the scent of burnt rubber lingered in the air. Liam's wheelchair gave out without warning. The right wheel wobbled, then snapped sideways, sending the boy lurching forward as he struggled to keep balance. Darnell, who was under the hood of an old pickup, dropped his wrench the moment he heard the sharp clatter. Without a word, he rushed outside, crouching beside the trembling boy. "You all right, champ?" he asked gently, already inspecting the wheel. Sarah arrived seconds later, breathless, panic written across her face. But Darnell had already steadied the chair, his calm voice keeping Liam from crying. From the garage door, a snide voice rang out. Mike, a younger mechanic with more mouth than skill, chuckled and shook his head. "Man, we fixing wheelchairs now. What's next, dog grooming?" he scoffed. Another voice followed. Mr. Burke, the shop's gruff owner, leaning against the office doorframe. "Darnell, that clock's still ticking. You want to donate your shift? Be my guest." Darnell didn't flinch. He waved them off without looking back and focused on the broken axle, muttering to Liam softly about airplanes and stability. What started as a quick fix turned into an upgrade. He pulled out old motor parts from a corner shelf, adjusted the alignment, reinforced the frame, and even installed a smoother turning mechanism from a spare motorized scooter. Every motion was deliberate, precise, like a man building something far greater than a chair. Sarah tried to interrupt, clutching a folded bill in her hand, insisting she pay for his time. But Darnell stopped her with a quiet shake of his head. "She would have wanted me to," he whispered, not explaining further. Nearby, customers paused their conversations. A man sipping coffee on the sidewalk lowered his cup. A teen across the street angled their phone, recording discreetly. Whispers floated on the breeze, not of mockery, but of something else. Wonder, maybe, recognition. As the sun dipped lower, the job was done. Liam gave the new wheel a test spin, the chair gliding smoother than ever before. The boy beamed. Sarah stared at Darnell, the bill still clutched in her hand, but now her gaze had shifted. Her eyes widened slightly, not in shock, but in realization. She looked at him not as a stranger anymore, but with a strange familiarity, as if a memory had been stirred, or a deeper connection revealed. Something unspoken passed between them, and for a moment she just stood there, silent, frozen, as if trying to place a face she should have remembered all along. 3 days had passed since Darnell last saw Liam and his mother. The incident with the wheelchair had faded into the background of grease-stained tools and half-repaired engines, though something about the boy's smile and the mother's lingering gaze stayed with him. It was a quiet morning at the shop, the kind where even the sound of a ratchet echoed like a whisper. Darnell lay under an old Buick, oil dripping steadily into a pan beside him, when he noticed a shift in the energy outside. First, it was the low hum of voices, then a rising buzz of excitement. He heard a car screech to a stop. Feet shuffled. Someone yelled, "Is that a jet?" Darnell slid out from under the car, wiping his hands on a rag, confused. The other mechanics had already rushed to the entrance, eyes wide. Out beyond the shop's dusty lot, a private jet was descending onto the small airfield just over the hill, its sleek silver body catching the sun. Within minutes, a black luxury SUV pulled up to the shop, gliding to a stop in front of everyone. The driver stepped out and opened the back door. First came Liam, but he looked transformed. His wheelchair was no longer the modest frame Darnell had repaired. It gleamed with custom engineering, sleek carbon fiber rims, digital control pads, a quiet motor built for efficiency and grace. Right behind him stepped Sarah, but she was nearly unrecognizable. Gone was the hoodie and fatigue. She wore a tailored suit, elegant heels, and the kind of composure that turned heads instantly. The crowd, including Mike and Mr. Burke, fell into stunned silence. Darnell stood frozen, rag still in hand, his brow furrowed with confusion. Sarah stepped forward, her voice calm but commanding. "Darnell," she said with a small smile, "I believe we owe you an explanation." He looked from her to Liam and back again. "What's all this?" he asked, glancing at the stunned crowd now gathering behind him. Sarah took a breath. "My husband was Henry Whitmore," she said slowly. A murmur rippled through the shop. Even Mr. Burke blinked in disbelief. "You mean Whitmore? As in Whitmore Biomedical?" Mike whispered. Darnell's eyes narrowed. Of course he'd heard the name. Whitmore Biomedical was the multi-billion-dollar medical tech empire behind some of the most advanced mobility devices in the world. "After Henry passed, I stepped away from the spotlight," Sarah continued, her voice softening. "But when I saw what you did for Liam, when I saw the way you upgraded his chair with your bare hands and no tools beyond what you had, I knew I had to come back." Darnell shifted uneasily. "I just fixed what was broken. That's all," he murmured. Sarah smiled, stepping closer. "No, Darnell, you did what billion-dollar companies couldn't. You saw a need, and you responded with heart and brilliance. My husband would have said the same." Burke cleared his throat, trying to insert himself. "Well, now we're always happy to help folks around here," he said awkwardly. Sarah's gaze didn't waver. "With respect, Mr. Burke, this wasn't about your shop. This was about one man." She turned back to Darnell. "We're opening a new lab, one that will be fully dedicated to adaptive technology for disabled children. We've already secured funding, property, staff, but we need someone who understands both the science and the heart behind it." She paused. "We need you to lead it." A long silence followed. Darnell looked down at his hands, grease-stained, rough, the same hands that had once built robots in a pristine lab, now accustomed to lug nuts and transmissions. "Me," he whispered. "But I'm just a mechanic." Sarah's answer came without hesitation. "No," she said gently. "You're the kind of man the world needs more of." Gasps echoed from the onlookers. Mike's mouth hung open. Burke stumbled back a step. Liam rolled forward, looking up at Darnell with admiration shining in his eyes. In that moment, Darnell didn't see himself in the reflection of his oil-streaked shop. He saw his daughter, smiling, proud, and for the first time in years, he felt the weight of loss lift, just enough to make room for something else. Purpose. As Darnell stood silently absorbing Sarah's offer, her next words peeled back a layer that made the moment even more surreal. "There's something else," she said, her voice now carrying the weight of something deeply personal. Before Henry passed, he was working on a secret prototype, a mobility enhancement system for children with rare muscular conditions. It was his passion project, something he kept off the books until it was perfected. Her eyes drifted to Liam's new chair, but after he died, the research was shelved. No one could replicate what he was building, no one. Until you. Darnell blinked, confused. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "I just used what I had, an old scooter motor, reinforced brackets, a bit of balanced geometry I used back in robotics." Sarah nodded slowly. "Exactly. The way you rewired the torque dampener, the load distribution angle on the back wheels, those weren't just clever fixes. That was Henry's method. You rebuilt what only he had ever designed." Her voice broke slightly. "When I saw Liam's wheelchair after you touched it, I didn't just see a better chair. I saw my husband's signature. It was like he was speaking through your hands." The weight of that revelation settled heavily in the air. It wasn't just generosity. It wasn't even just brilliance. It was destiny, unfolding quietly in a dusty auto shop by a man who'd once lost everything and didn't realize what he still carried within him. Behind them, Mike, the mechanic who had mocked Darnell days ago, shifted uncomfortably. He stared down at his shoes, his usual smirk replaced with tight-lipped silence. For once, he had nothing to say. Mr. Burke stepped forward, awkwardly clearing his throat. "Well, we always knew Darnell was something special," he said, forcing a chuckle that fell flat. "Just didn't know he had all that in him." But the room didn't respond. No one applauded. Because this wasn't about recognition or praise. It was about something far more sacred. Sarah stepped closer, her expression gentle but resolute. "Darnell, I believe my husband's project wasn't meant to be finished by him alone. He lit the fire, but you're the one who's meant to carry it forward." Darnell felt a knot form in his throat. The world around him blurred slightly as his eyes misted. He wasn't just a mechanic. He was the missing piece in a story that had begun long before he met Liam, and was now asking him to turn the page. The following week, Darnell boarded a jet for the first time in his life, not as a passenger escaping his small-town routine, but as an honored guest headed toward a future he never imagined. When the plane touched down in the city, he was greeted not with fanfare, but with purpose. A driver escorted him to a sleek, glass-walled building with sunlight pouring in through skylights. Inside, he walked silently through the newly built Whitmore Adaptive Innovation Lab. Scientists and engineers in lab coats paused as he entered, offering quiet nods of respect. On the far wall, etched in silver beside the Foundation's logo, was a plaque that read, "Hayes and Whitmore Mobility Initiative, built by hands that never gave up." He reached out to touch it, his fingers trembling slightly. No longer covered in grease, but still calloused with the story that brought him there. Before leaving town, Darnell had stood in the center of the auto shop one last time. The tools were quiet. The air smelled the same: motor oil, rubber, old wood, but something felt different. He looked around at the cracked floor, the faded calendar, the wall clock that had ticked through years of his silent grief. One by one, the guys came to say goodbye. Mike mumbled something about being sorry, unable to meet his eyes, but then added he'd started volunteering at the local shelter. Mr. Burke, unusually quiet, handed Darnell a donation receipt for a generous contribution to a children's mobility fund. There were no speeches, no applause, just quiet acknowledgement, and the kind of respect that doesn't need words. Now, standing in the lab, Darnell held blueprints for a new kind of wheelchair, lightweight, sensor-guided, customizable for every child's needs. He didn't wear a tie. He didn't need one. The power in his presence came from something deeper. Over the next few months, a quiet revolution began. Children from across the country arrived at the facility. The first time Darnell saw a little girl zip down the hallway in one of his designs, laughing freely, tears burned the corners of his eyes. Parents thanked him with shaking hands. His photo now hung beside Henry Whitmore's in the Foundation office, the two men who'd built the dream from opposite ends of loss. Late one evening, Darnell stood alone in the lab. A prototype hummed gently behind him, the lights dimmed, the city quiet outside. He closed his eyes, and there she was, his daughter. Her smile, the way she used to watch him tinker with machines at the kitchen table, the joy in her face when he promised to build her a bike one day. He never got to build that bike, but now he was building for thousands like her. The pain that once felt endless had become a compass, guiding every step. Back in his hometown, things had shifted. People spoke his name differently, not out of pity or as the quiet guy who kept to himself, but as someone who had done something extraordinary without asking for anything in return. The community started holding mobility awareness drives. The local school added an inclusion program in his name. Liam and Sarah visited often, their bond with Darnell now something deeper than gratitude. It was family. And Mike, once full of sarcasm, was now organizing weekend repair drives for kids in need, quietly trying to follow in the footsteps of the man he once laughed at. Sometimes, Darnell would later say during a small speech at the Foundation's anniversary, life gives us a second chance, not with words, but with people. And if we're lucky, we recognize them when they arrive. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the private airstrip as the jet waited quietly, its engine purring like a promise. Darnell stood beside Liam, now confidently maneuvering his high-tech wheelchair with the ease of a seasoned pilot. The boy looked up at him with a grin that held more than just gratitude. It held admiration, respect, and something deeper, belonging. "Come on," Liam said, nodding toward the open steps of the jet. "Your kindness gave me wings. Now let me return the favor." Darnell chuckled, blinking back the emotion that rose in his chest as he followed the boy toward the aircraft. As they boarded, the wind stirred behind them, almost as if carrying away the weight of all the years lost. He had given without expecting, and the world had given back something he never imagined. Do you believe kindness always returns in some form? Have you ever experienced a moment where one small act changed everything? Share this story with someone who's made a difference in your life, no matter how small. And if stories like this move you, stories of heart, healing, and unexpected miracles, we'll be here every day with another reminder that goodness still exists in this world.